Yeah, what's up? What's happening? Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app on this here Thursday. When the hell did it become Thursday? I don't know. Here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Thursday. And we have to start really the first hour of the show and change. We're gonna start where we ended yesterday. Now, some of you might not know because you tuned out at 7 and then you were like, oh, well, I guess, damn, shame that Tommy Sheppard news broke and Hoffman was off the air. Well, we stayed. We stayed until 8 o'clock last night. It was hilarious because Anthony had to go. Anthony's out today. Toby's in. Shout out to Toby for hanging out with us the next couple of days. But for the first time in 13 and a half years, my boss, Chris Kynard, our program director, bigwig, runs a lot of radio stations. He was reduced to the lowly role of running the board for me as I continued to yap about Tommy Sheppard. I'm sure that'll go in his future Radio Hall of Fame induction plaque, produced the night that Tommy Sheppard was fired. So if you heard what I said last night, then thanks for staying up late with us or tuning back in. If you didn't, don't go anywhere because here we go. Tommy Sheppard let go yesterday after many years on the job. 4 of them in the most recent role of general manager. He added the president title at some point in that. Of course, he was hired after Ernie Grunfeld, his boss for over a decade, was fired in 2019. First, he was the interim. Ted went on some chase after Tim Connolly, who ultimately wound up going to Minnesota and signing off on the Rudy Gobert trade. Fun. And Tommy eventually got the job. And I certainly was excited a bit at the time because I would say this. First of all, I wrote a column at the time that was basically saying this was a joke, that we're waiting this long. We all know it's going to be Tommy Sheppard, and all Ted Leonsis did in not naming Sheppard the GM immediately was save some money on keeping him on the interim title, and then eventually gives him the raise and the promotion and the whole deal. But I guess there was some running out of ground balls in a pursuit of Tim Connolly that ultimately never came to fruition. However, he signs Sheppard, who immediately says, we're going to do things a little differently. I know I've been here the whole time, but it was Ernie's ship. And, my job was to support him, but I want to, I'm not sitting here trying to get to 8th in the Eastern Conference. We're going to go for it. We're going to do more. We're going to be more assertive. We're going to this, that, the other thing. Obviously, the whole trajectory of the franchise changes with John Wall's injuries. And I think that's important. The Tommy Sheppard story is one that Tommy can very easily look back on and go, well, if all these bad things didn't happen to me, then it goes differently, and be correct, while his critics can look back and go, yeah, but the stuff you did control, you did a bad job of. And both those things can be true at once. And unfortunately, for a lot of NBA executives, that ultimately winds up being their story, is things happen to Tommy Sheppard. Right? The John Wall contract, they give him fine, but ultimately, and that was under Ernie. Of course, Tommy's a part of that staff too, but that's obviously a pretty standard thing. John is your star player. He's coming off incredible runs in 2016, 2017. He's hurt, but you think it's not a big deal. Give him the contract, and before he ever plays a game, basically, that contract ever kicks in, he's got career-altering injuries. You're just screwed. And that's how Tommy enters. And then, instead of letting John eventually get back and seeing how it goes, they do trade him. And they do that with, a trade for Russell Westbrook that ultimately, results in the only playoff appearance in Tommy Sheppard's tenure. Russ was very, very, very good here. He wasn't great. That's not who he is at this point in his career. But Russell Westbrook was an excellent player. And more importantly, he was someone who had a year less on his contract. Meaning that after one season, when Russell Westbrook apparently was like, I would like to go back to Los Angeles, and the Lakers were like, we will do that deal, they were able to flip him and get good pieces. To that point, I would have given Tommy Sheppard a fairly high grade. I would have had concerns about the draft picks not really panning out. But I would have said, if you had turned John Wall's contract with fairly minimal draft impact into a playoff season with Russell Westbrook, and then a young, really promising piece in Kyle Kuzma and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I'm not mad at that. But unfortunately, that was just one of the off-ramps that they missed. It has been clear for a long time that Bradley Beal, and I don't say this to try to dump on Brad. Like, it's not Brad's fault that he's Brad Beal, who's an excellent basketball player. But the bar is incredibly high to be the centerpiece of a legitimate contender. And I'm going to use the word as much as I can, as much as I remember today, contender, as opposed to championship caliber team. Because the reality is, unless you have Michael Jordan in the 90s or LeBron from about 2010 to 2018, it is hard to guarantee yourself competing for a championship year in, year out, as in you are in the finals. And even then, like, it wasn't guaranteed all them years. It's why LeBron's run of 8 in a row, MJ's run of 6 and 8 with the 2 retirement years in between. Why Magic's 5 championships and 9 finals appearances in a 12-year career are so remarkable. You're not supposed to be able to do that. But to be a team that we'll define as a contender, like, are you a legitimate threat to make the conference finals year in and year out? Bradley Beal was never going to be the best player on a team that did that. His peak is about the 15th best guy in the league. That happened a couple years ago. He was an all-NBA third team, like, legitimate contender. Can't remember if he actually wound up making it. I don't think he did. But the point is, you had to know that once John Wall was not that guy, who had a much better chance of being a top 10 player in this league, a former number 1 overall pick, the electricity, all of it, that you had to take a different path. And Tommy just didn't. And what I struggle with, and what I really would like to know from Ted Leonsis, is, did you decide, like, why is it that Tommy gets fired for executing essentially your plan? Now, Ted's answer might very well be, I gave him the mandate to build as best as he could around Bradley Beal. We've had multiple top 10 picks, and none of those guys have been very good for us. Our best hope is that within the next 3 years, Denny Advia and Johnny Davis are solid players, but neither of them looks like all-stars. And Rui we already traded, and Troy Brown we already traded. And, like, we just haven't, he was one of our lead scouts going all the way back to John and Brad and the guys that we've drafted since then, the Otto Porters. Like, none of those guys. Outside of John and Brad, who were pretty freaking obvious picks, we hadn't done jack diddly poo. And I look at other organizations that have drafted the Giannis's and the Jokic's and all these different guys, and not that I expect that we're going to, it's hard to get that lucky, but we've had enough shots at it that can we at least do better than this? Can we draft an all-star? Can we draft a guy that gets to a second contract? And the answer has been no. Which is why yesterday's news is terribly unsurprising. Or at least it should have been. 10 days after the season, when he already represented you at the season-ending press conference, it's stunning. Stunning that Ted Leonsis made this move. It is so un-Ted-like. But he did. And this leaves lingering questions. The biggest, of course, is what is the plan moving forward? Is Ted willing to hire an executive from outside the organization, which he said he's going to do, that is allowed to explore trades for Bradley Beal, that is not required to re-sign Kristaps Porzingis and Kyle Kuzma? Because if you're just hiring a different steward of the same ship, you've already run into the iceberg. You're sinking. You got to figure out a different path. And by the way, you're going to have to do the hard work to patch it up first. So what's next for Beal? What's next for Kuzma? What's next for Porzingis? Those are the three questions we tackle next. And then I just want to take your calls and react and talk with you, Wizards fans. 301-230-0980. Josh Robbins joins us at 5 o'clock to discuss as well from The Athletic. RIvera Mayhew press conference, pre-draft talk coming later in the show as well. But we'll talk about the Wizards' big three and what's next for them now that Tommy Sheppard is gone, next on the Team 980.
Daniel Snipe.
The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Also streaming live, youtube.com/@theteam980 if you want to check us out there. I tend to check the chat as well on YouTube so you can get in the show that way. Try to check it during the break. Try not to look at it during the show, like while I'm talking, because I'm tremendously ADD and I will focus on the wrong things. We're focused right now, though, on the Wizards and Tommy Sheppard's departure, what it means for everybody else. And let's just start with the big three. And we'll take your phone calls on all of this coming up at the bottom of the hour, 301-230-0980. Might sneak a few in at the end of this segment as well, so you can go ahead and hop on hold if you want to call in. Again, 301-230-0980. The biggest piece in this, the thing that starts it all, is Beal. Because you need to figure out what's out there and what you're trying to get in return. And I will go ahead and say this to the folks in my YouTube comments saying, trade him for Jaylen Brown. Jaylen gets his fresh start, and Jason Tatum gets to play with Brad, and they grew up together in St. Louis. Why the hell would the Celtics do that? I understand they don't necessarily want to pay Jaylen Brown a lot of money, but then you'd just be paying Bradley Beal a lot of money. Are you sending Bradley Beal and drugs to Brad Stevens so that Brad Stevens can take the drugs and then think that's a good idea? No. Anytime that you do a trade that would get rejected in NBA 2K, you take your hand and you smack it and you say, bad basketball brain. And you do not send that comment. You do not send that tweet. Don't do that. We don't need to waste time on it. You shut that down fast enough? Powerful enough? Excellent. Okay. Not doing. Now, look, if you can get Jaylen Brown, sweet. All right. Nothing on this roster that the Celtics are going to want in return for Jaylen Brown. With that said, you have to go to Bradley Beal and ask him, are you willing to be traded? And this is the downside of giving him the dumbest thing in the possible world, or the dumbest thing in the world, which was a no trade clause that you absolutely did not have to give him. But they did, because they wanted to show commitment. The problem is things change. And sometimes, again, I'm not trying. Brad said this on his media day. All you media are trying to run me out of town. I'm not necessarily trying to run Brad out of town. It's just the Wizards set you up, Brad, to where I don't know that you can win here with the way the salary cap and the roster is structured, and unless you get really lucky in this draft. But even then, if you get, a top flight player, turns out to be an all-star, is it going to be happening in the next year or two? And while you're still in the crux of your prime, it's a lot of questions, man. And also, when you Kuz and Porzingis were together this year, you guys were 16-19 in 35 games. So if you, Bradley Beal, would like to compete, you, on your timeline, are better off going somewhere else. So I'm not running you out of town for my sake. I'm asking you if you want to leave for yours. So you have to go to Brad, and then you have to decide what you want in return. Are you trying to get another star back, a disgruntled star somewhere? And who knows, maybe the Jaylen Brown thing. But again, I'd rather also Jaylen's contract is going to cost less than I think what the Wizards are paying Beal because he's younger. He hasn't hit the 10-year mark yet. So I'm pretty sure that they'd rather, if they're going to pay someone that's not Jason Tatum a lot of money, they don't want it to be Bradley Beal. But you try to find someone somewhere who you can flip that for, or more than likely, you figure out the salaries, a bunch of one-year salary dump type of situations, and you get draft picks back. A team like the Lakers might be interested in Beal. Is a team like the Clippers interested in Beal? Is a team like Portland? Probably not. I don't think, unless they think Lillard Beal is enough to help them compete in the Western Conference, I doubt it. And it sounds like they might be looking at another younger direction potentially. And who knows if Lillard's going to be on the block this offseason. So I don't know all the potential landing spots for Beal. I mean, Philly's been one that I've had my eye on forever. Could you somehow get Tyrese Maxey back in that deal? Especially if Harden leaves. Obviously, if Harden leaves, they're not going to give up Maxey. But, is there a way that Beal and Embiid get paired up? And would Brad be willing to do that? Because here's the thing. Do you want to trade to the team that's geographically closest to you in a division rival? Of course not. But if you're not really caring if you're good next year, then who cares? Focus on you. Get the best return that you can. And again, whether that's young players and or draft picks, and then some older guys to fill out the contract because you have to make the trade work with the math, then so be it. But the problem is you got to do it to somewhere that Beal wants to go. because he cannot, he can just say no. He has a no trade clause. So there's that. If he's open to it, trade him. Run, don't walk. Just please start over. Porzingis is one that I'm a lot more torn on. He is an incredibly mature guy who seemed to be great in the locker room. He obviously can be a volume scorer for you. He seems to be a pro that goes about his business in the right way. He wants to win. Obviously, not that Brad doesn't. All these guys want to win, but I think he also gets the bigger picture. And depending on what contract offers are out there for him, I would consider a sign and trade for him. I would consider telling him, we'll happily pay you $36 million next year if you want to opt into your player option, and we'll try to trade you at the deadline. They've obviously, it's been reported from Josh Robbins, who's going to join us at 5 o'clock. They'd already started on contract extension talks for him, so I will have to ask Josh what that means for those talks. But KP's coming off one of the best seasons he's had. So to the extent that you even have control over him, because that is also limited because he could just opt out and become a free agent, I would try to sell high on Porzingis. I would say, hey, man, you're awesome. You're always going to get a warm welcome here. We've already started on the tribute video for next year. However, we don't think that we can win with our current roster, and we really need a hard reset. So we're going to try to get you somewhere that is a competitive team. And send him. That's what I would do with Porzingis. And then Kuzma, the crux of Tommy Sheppard and I's relationship. Kuzma is a really fantastic player who you have zero control over. He could look at whatever's happening here and make whatever decision he wants. And this is why they should have traded him in February. They should have had the reality check that they just weren't going to be able to compete for anything more than the play-in. And at that point, what's better? Competing for the play-in or getting something for the asset? And I know that their plan all along was to re-sign him. And if you trade him, the chances that he then comes back and is like, yeah, I'll sign there, especially when you can no longer pay him extra money because you don't have his bird rights anymore, is slim to none. But it was always a flawed plan. And I guess that's kind of the point, is they can tell me the reasons why they did the things they did, or in this case, didn't do the things they did. And I would go, yes, that's silly. What the hell are we trying to do here? Are we just trying to get in the first round, get 2 games worth of playoff gate, and get swept or gentlemen swept as we get blown out by Milwaukee, Boston, or Philly? Or are we actually trying to build something that's more sustainable for the long term? And so if I'm Kuzma, I guess you could stay and take the money if they offer you max money. I don't know that a new GM is going to look at Kyle Kuzma and be like, yep, maximum money. In which case, they're in the same playing field as everybody else. So that kind of sucks. I think at this point, you hope that he's willing to maybe do a sign and trade, that another team that wants him doesn't have the cap space to sign him, and you can get something in return. That would be my hope. But there's obviously no guarantees. So, what do you make of all of this? What do you want to see moving forward? We can talk through it. If you got questions like, hey, I know that Kuzma's a free agent. I don't want to keep him, but I don't want to give him up for nothing. How does that work? Any of the mechanics, I'm pretty locked in on a lot of that stuff. So go ahead and give us a call, or just your takes. How you feeling today as a Wizards fan? Hopeful, optimistic, still pessimistic, neutral, apathetic. 301-230-0980. Your calls get us started next here on The Hoffman Show.
This
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. Taking your calls now, 301-230-0980 is the phone number. And just give us a call, and then we are like, hey, what you think? So we do that now, 301-230-0980. Let's start off with Tony in D.C. talking Wizards with us. Tony, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, Craig, first things first. If we get rid of all three of them, we're going to be the Washington Nationals in baseball, for one, because we already bad. So if we really tank, or not tank, but give up so many players, we're going to be in the same rut as we are in another 5 years. Okay, let me say this. One, I want to get rid of Porzingis because he's 7'3", and you can't teach height. We need somebody that's tall. We need a true center. I wouldn't get rid of Kuzma because he's kind of like our best forward that we have right now and everything. But I will get rid of Beal because, again, I'd rather pay two people instead of one. So that's my whole my thing about that. So whoever GM that comes in or they fire or hire, I hope they can do whatever kind of deal they can to get rid of Beal, because we almost in the same position when we had John Wall. We could not get rid of him because he had almost had the same kind of contract. But they managed to get trade him for Westbrook. So same thing for Beal.
Tony, how much of the NBA do you consume outside of the Washington Wizards?
Plenty. Why?
So, do you remember like the 2018-ish Oklahoma City Thunder?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the last team that Russell Westbrook was on in Oklahoma City. They
Correct.
were okay. They had some other pieces that I think you look at and be like, oh, those are good basketball players. And you know what they did? They blew it up, right?
Right.
And would you rather be the Washington Wizards today or the Oklahoma City Thunder today?
Oklahoma City Thunder today because they are in the playoffs. But, again, they still have pieces that they can build around. If we get
how did they get those pieces?
Through trades, right?
Trades, and some of those trades were direct to players, right? They give up Paul George for they trade Paul George for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a young player,
right?
Who we didn't know was going to be this good, but they thought was like, yeah, he's really good. And then trades to get draft picks, which they then did a really good job on. So when you talk about getting rid of Kuzma, Beal, and Porzingis, it's not like you're punting them into the ocean with no return. You get stuff back. Theoretically, Kuzma, that's why you should have traded him in February. But hopefully now you can at least get a sign and trade. But like, it's not like you're just giving them up. The whole idea is you give them up, and yeah, you're going to be bad for a couple of years, but you get stuff back. And the stuff you get back helps you build a championship contender.
But Craig, but look at our trade and draft history. It has not been good. Look what we got for Hachimura. We got none. And what did we get for none? Nothing. Too much. So
who made those trades?
I'm looking at
who made those trades?
The departed Tommy Sheppard.
Oh, so it may not be the trades. It may be the person who makes them.
For this organization, it's across the board, man. Because again, like I said, we just haven't been good for so long and everything. And like I say, we really had too much around here to cheer about since Wall departed.
Tony, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. You are a fan that cares, and I appreciate that. I appreciate how much you care, and I appreciate the fact that you want this to get better. What I'm trying to tell you is, holding on to these guys is not going to help you get better. There's going to have to be some lean years to get to the place where you have the young talent and that you're ascending again, and it feels like it felt in, let's say, 2015, 2016, when Wall and Beal looked like they could take this team to the Eastern Conference Finals or maybe even farther. You're going to have to be bad again.
So that means we're going to look like the Houston Rockets, the Detroit Pistons, and any other team that's on the upswing with the young players. So we're going to have to sit around and wait for these players to mature and everything again?
You got a better
That's
plan?
what you're saying? Well, no, I don't have no plan for right now because, again, I'm saying I don't have a plan for right now because, again, it can go so many directions in this way, Craig. I'm really serious. It can go direction. I would at least keep one of the two, Porzingis or Kuzma. And like I say, get rid of Beal, man, because he's stifling us. We would not be able to go nowhere with that contract he has. We can't bring nobody in.
Yeah.
And just like Doc Walker was talking about earlier, when we was trying to bring KD to D.C., we couldn't even do that. He wouldn't even give us a conversation. And that's a darn shame, man, because LeBron went back to Cleveland and won a championship for his home state, Ohio, in Cleveland, and we can't get Durant just to give us a conversation. We need something here, man, because we haven't won since 78.
I hear you, Tony.
I was in high school when we won.
Tony, I appreciate the call a lot. I'm going to let you run because we got a couple other people, and I'm going to respond to what you just said off the air. As I was having this conversation before the show. Why can't D.C. be Cleveland for LeBron? I mean, part of that is they drafted LeBron, and there's a little bit more there, but why can't it be a place that people want to go, a place that people want to play? And the problem isn't the city. The problem is the organization. This organization has meant mediocrity for decades. They haven't won 50 games since Tony was in high school. The last time they won in the late 1970s. Nobody wants to come to that. What it's going to take is getting young guys, because we live in a world where there is a draft. And the players that get drafted don't have a choice. So what happens is you need to trade the good players that you have. And if you want to keep a Kuzma or a Porzingis, fine. I don't think they're going to help you win that many games by looking at what happened this year. But, the idea is that you're as bad as possible to help your lottery odds be as good as possible. And then hopefully you win the lottery, either in a literal sense, you get the number one pick, or, you draft 8th, but you get Steph Curry, or 7th, and you get Steph Curry, or, you have a year where you finish 15th, but you draft Giannis. Like, you just need to get it right and get the guy, keep him here, do things the right way as an organization, get a couple of other really good players, and in 3 years, you could be the young, exciting team of the NBA. But the longer you try to hold on to being competitive for the sake of being competitive, even if that ultimately means you're actually not that good, the more you're slowing that process. So why would you want to slow the process down? Just rip the Band-Aid off. And I know that's not very fun, but I promise you it's a hell of a lot more fun than the painful mediocrity that they've had for the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, at this point, damn near 50 years. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Let's get to one more before we go to break. We got plenty of time to take more calls in the next segment, too. Let's go to Dean in Gaithersburg. Dean, what's up? You're on the Hoffman Show.
What's up, Craig? I'm thinking it's a combination of coaching and the talent that we get that comes to the DMV. Because when we do have real good talent, the talent becomes spoiled. They end up hanging out, and I'm speaking more like Chris Webber, Juwan Howard era, Rod Strickland. And then when we're talking about John Wall and Bradley Beal at their highest level with the extra, what's the guy, RIvera, we got him twice for leadership stuff.
Yep.
Again, the coaching, when Eddie Jordan was here, when even I can't remember the other guy between, but every coach that comes here ends up having to battle with the outside of the player, and then if they know how to coach. Right now, with us owing, I guess, Wes Unseld the world because he gave us the only championship we know. I'm almost with you, Craig, with blowing it all the way up. But if we blow it all the way up again and you start drafting, you have to say to yourself, I have to hit, because we were hitting. The reason why John Wall and Bradley Beal are here at the same time, and we had great success, because Oubre hit, Otto Porter hit. These guys hit.
Well, hold on. I'm gonna saying those guys hit though is like they're solid NBA players, but hitting
they got
means
a second contract though, Craig. They got a big contract. The second contract, we couldn't pay them, and they're decent players.
No, see, this is where I disagree. Hitting on a guy that's your third guy means you're willing to pay him no matter what. Those guys got big contracts, but they wouldn't have been good ones to match for the Wizards. And so, like, hitting is like, you get a guy, you keep him for a decade, especially like in Otto's case. He was the third overall pick. And I realize it was a notoriously weak draft, but you can't tell me the third overall pick is a hit if he doesn't play for you by year 5. Like, that's not a hit. That's a bad job of roster building because you've drafted a guy that it's not worth it. And, like, Draymond, Clay, and Steph, and look, Steph's contract back in whatever it was, the 10 for 4 or the 4 for 44 is the greatest contract in the history of sports. But still, those guys have signed big money contracts since then. Like, that to me is hitting.
You didn't know Steph was going to do what Steph was going to do either, though. You didn't know what Steph was going to do.
Like, the Spurs didn't know what Manu and Tony Parker were going to do. Like, that's what it takes to really compete. And so, like, I hear you that maybe it's a little better, but, like, certainly in the since 2015, like, Oubre is the last guy that you'd even put that designation on. And, like, we're talking about Kelly Oubre. And no disrespect to Kelly. Right. He's a fine player, but, like, he's not a really, really good NBA player. And I guess my point is, like, what's the level? What are we trying to do?
With John Wall running the point and Bradley Beal being Killer Panda at the time, we could those extra Ottos, those extra Kellys, those extra Gafford. Now Gafford is like JaVale McGee all over again. I mean, again, I'm with you 100%, Craig. I like your logic and everything when you speak about the NBA. Again, we blow it up and we give it to Wes Unseld Jr. I didn't know what Wes was running. I didn't know what offense we were running until I think Scott Jackson got some information and said that we were running the Denver Nuggets.
Right, but you're trying to run it without Jokic, which is a different thing. Here's the last thing I would say, Dean, on your larger point. I'm well documented on the record with Wes, and I'm like, I just don't know what to make of him yet. I'm willing to give him another year. Let's see how it goes. But here's the thing I would say about, like, the idea of John and Brad together with, Kelly and Otto, and, like, yeah, that's the best it's been. Still what they haven't done since the late 1970s? Win 50 games. Yes, so, like, what are we actually talking about?
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
It's crazy. Dean, I appreciate the call, man. We're up against the break, so I'm going to let you go, but I really appreciate the call. You all are great on the phones. We'll keep going next. I'll try to move a little bit faster through some of these calls, get everybody in before Josh Robin joins us at 5, and then we'll get back to the phones later in the show as well. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Just going to hit two things real quick. First, the Clippers have ruled Kawhi Leonard out tonight. He has a sprained right knee. He will miss Game 3 of their series against the Suns. Clippers only won 3 games all year without Kawhi and Paul George in the lineup. They'll be without both tonight as they host Game 3 against the Suns. According to multiple reports, Matt Patricia, the former Patriots defensive coordinator, former Lions head coach, is now a special assistant on the defensive side for the Eagles. He was part of the offensive coordinator conglomerate for the Patriots last year. That was a flaming disaster. That's what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your phone calls on the Wizards. Tommy Sheppard let go yesterday, 301-230-0980. Let's just get right back into it. We got at least 4 folks right now. We'll get to more calls coming up in the next hour, but I want to try to get through as many as I can before Josh Robbins of The Athletic joins us at the top of the hour. Let's go to Noel in Chicago, listening, I guess, on the Odyssey app or on the YouTube stream. Noel, first, how do I pronounce your name correctly? And second, how are you listening?
I'm listening through the Odyssey app, and it's pronounced Noel.
Noel. All right. Go ahead with your Wizards thoughts now that we got all that straightened away, and appreciate you listening.
No problem, and thank you for asking me that question as well. So when I heard about the news with Tommy getting fired, I called one of my best friends and was excited and really relieved. But, now the real true work begins. And I think, the 3 main guys on our roster, Beal, Porzingis, Kuzma, it's fairly obvious that Beal's contract is a very, very big issue. But what I think is really important, though, is who's the GM that we're going to hire and the president that we're going to hire. I don't know if we're going to have 1 guy, 2 guys, whatever it is. But I just want to know, and this sounds so surface level, but what kind of basketball team are we going to be as the Washington Wizards? Because I have never figured that out ever since Wall and Beal and that whole combination just ended back in 2017. So that to me is like the first thing that we got to figure out and establish before a lot of these other decisions can be made. So whether if it's Bob Myers, whether if it's Masai Ujiri, Trajan Langdon from the Pelicans, I don't care. Tell Ted, tell all of us what kind of team you want to have. Obviously, with Beal's contract, it's really hard because we all know by now that he's an off-the-ball player, and a player like that giving a max extension to is just difficult to keep. From that, maybe we can figure out also what Kuzma and Porzingis are going to be doing as far as if we're going to re-sign them or not. I'd prefer not to, but I just want to know what we're going to be, and I hope you feel the same way. I don't know what we are.
No, Noel, it's a great call. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. It's a great question. Like, what is the identity of the Wizards? I do think there was a stretch with John here where it was like, we're up pace, in your face kind of team that had an attitude, it had an identity. There was a toughness to John and the way he played. Paul Pierce helped with that tremendously the year that he was here. So there's definitely been at times that, but I think it's a great point because you look at Golden State, the gold standard of the league. It's like they know exactly who they are offensively. They're a motion offense that's trying to get shots for the three-point shooters, and they bring in players that are excellent screeners and cutters, if not great shooters off of that. And then defensively, they look for highly switchable players, and they know exactly what they want to be. Sacramento is obviously a speed-driven team with De'Aaron Fox, and they've gotten a bunch of great athletes, guys like Harrison Barnes, who can go out and run with him, and one of the best rebounders in the league in Domantas Sabonis to start their break, and then obviously helps them out tremendously in the half court. Other team, like the Clippers, have some level of an identity, obviously that's built around Leonard and George and what they can do athletically. Milwaukee's team identity is incredibly tough defensive team with the long athletes that know how to use that length and clog things up on the defensive end, and then Giannis surround him with shooters offensively, and then Chris Middleton can help with some of the mid-range stuff to take them home. Like, they know who they are. You keep going down the list. I don't know who the Wizards are, and it's something that Corey Kispert said after the season that I thought was so freaking insightful, that he said, I just don't know who we are. So if we have these injuries where other teams survive them, ours is like guys go out and we completely change who we are. And some of that obviously is on Wes Unseld Jr. But I do think some of that came from Tommy Sheppard on down in the front office, because they were the ones that were like, we're signing Brad to this deal. We're going to give him more responsibilities. We're going to put him on the ball. And then Tommy comes out after the year is like, yeah, we're going to take him off the ball. And like, I hope that whoever the next, here's what I'll say about Wes Unseld. Here's the most definitive thing I will say about Wes Unseld. I hope the next GM comes in and either has a coach they want and blows Unseld out, and is like, Wes, thanks so much for your service, on to the next. Or he truly lets Wes do whatever Wes wants unencumbered on the year. Like, collaboration is fine. front offices are involved in substitution decisions and some of these things, and I can go into that at a different time and how those things can happen in a good way. But, like, let him really put his imprint on the team and empower him so that players feel like they got to listen. Because I don't know that that actually was the case, the way the ownership to front office to coach to player structure worked, and not always in that order. All right, let's go to Sanford and Bowie. Sanford, thanks for calling. Or Bowie. Thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hi, Craig. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Right, yeah, fine. I've been a Wizards fan and Bullets fan from way back in the 70s when they won their first title to all the way to today. The one thing I don't want to see a blowout, because that's what the Nassau now. The Nassau team, they blew it up and now they suck. So I don't want to see that. But what I do think you need is to get a good GM here that can do both. He can trade Beal, hopefully, for some good assets, decide between KP and Kuzma as to what he wants to do there, and then trade for some veterans as well as hit on the draft pick. My problem with the Wizards is they're uncommon. They did not hit on the draft pick. If you get a good GM that knows how to draft, you can just buy top of the draft, the middle of the draft, stack around the draft. So I want someone that can really know how to draft, that can do both. They can kind of do a retool and a rebuild at the same time. But I don't want to see a blowout because I don't want to see a horrible team. Because with a blowout, you never know how long it's going to take for them to become good. And I don't want to have that uncertainty. So I'm just hoping that they do kind of a rebuild retool, move Beal, move perhaps Denny. Maybe.
I mean, but what you're describing to me, Sanford, is a blow-up. Like, you're taking the core of your team and you're getting rid of it. If it happens to turn around quickly, great. If you win a couple of trades, great. I'm just realistic about what you're going to get in return. Like, teams that are trying to acquire good players from you and put them in different roles that are more useful to them than they are you are probably not. I mean, maybe it works out that they've got a guy that works better here than there, but chances are what you're getting back is draft picks and young players that are gigantic wild cards. It's going to be hard to get a vet to come here because good vets that are acquirable don't really exist unless they're disgruntled stars that are just forcing their way out. And I don't know that the Wizards are getting one of those. I don't even know which one of those are available. I feel terrible because I said I was going to move faster through calls, and I did a really bad job. So we'll get back to calls. We're going to do some Commander stuff at 5:15. I might just go back to calls because we had great ones, and I frankly want to keep talking about this because talking to you guys is fascinating because the tolerance of the fan base for a rebuild is actually a really important data point here. So we'll do that coming up. So if you're on hold right now, you can hang on hold if you want, or just give us a call back because Josh Robbins of The Athletic is next for Not My Beat here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 5 o'clock means we bring in an elevated level of expertise on our top story of the day. And obviously our top story today is that Tommy Sheppard no longer has a job as of last night.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
All right, today's guest on that very topic is the Athletics' Josh Robbins. Josh, what's up? What's happening? Welcome back to the show, sir.
Nothing happening. Nothing. No news.
Nothing. Just a nice, chill day in the neighborhood. You know, you're 10 days into the off season. What could possibly happen at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday? Certainly, that's what I was thinking last night as I signed off of the radio show, then wound up running back in the studio to do an extra hour. Did you have any, I don't want to say heads up, but did you have an inkling this could happen? How surprised were you when you either saw the report or got the press release last night?
Not surprised that this could happen. Surprised by the timing. I thought that there was a real chance of this happening, but as the days beyond the regular season elapsed, I thought that the chances reduced. I thought that whatever the decision was going to be, that could be made relatively quickly. How much more needed to be analyzed or seen, or how much more data, whether through interviews or whatever, had to be collected that it took till Wednesday of the following week after the end of the season. Either way, whether I'm surprised or not is irrelevant. I think the real question is who do they bring in, and to what degree does that person have autonomy to either go forward or with the same plan or totally rework the plan.
100% agree. Those are the questions. We will tackle them momentarily. However, just on the dismissal side of it, though, do you have any idea what the impetus was for the timing? What was the thing that pushed this across the Rubicon, that it did happen 10 days after the season ended? And, by the way, after Sheppard had been the one to comment to you and others about Wes Unseld's job and had represented the team in their postseason press conference.
That is interesting, isn't it? And I really do mean that. He operated as if this was not going to happen. He went to the Nike Hoop Summit out in Portland during the final full week of the regular season. I believe that he went to Portsmouth for the Portsmouth Invitational, where teams interview four-year college players. In that sense, it is very interesting. I think what happened. Well, I think Ted Leonsis is said to have had a review process in which he spoke to others, maybe spoke to players, maybe spoke to other stakeholders. I would like to know more about that, and I think that's one of the reasons why the person who made the decision should have been available to the press last night or the following day to provide a little bit more transparency as to what happened. There's no question that he did meet with Tommy yesterday. What, if anything, unusual happened during that meeting, I have no idea. But they did speak yesterday, and then the decision was eventually conveyed.
That's pretty fascinating, and I agree with you. I'm kind of surprised that there hasn't been a, hey, Ted will talk, even if it's early next week. He certainly, to the extent that these people owe us anything, he owes us. He owes us a press conference and explanation. I certainly believe in that transparency. And by the way, Josh, after covering the Washington Commanders for many years and never talking to the owner, welcome to D.C., I guess. It just tends to be how this thing goes.
To be fair to him, to be extra fair to him, because we are fair to him in the press, I think.
Yeah.
There are very few team owners who do make themselves available. In a case like this, it would be usually the CEO of a team. Usually. So take that for what it's worth. It's not like he's an outlier here, but I do think in a case like this that there is a degree of transparency and fuller explanation is important in this case.
No, I agree. And, Leonsis does carry the CEO title of Monumental Sports, so I guess theoretically it would be the same guy. But I hopefully we hear more from Ted, obviously, in the next couple of days. Realistically, Josh Robbins, our guest from The Athletic, here on the Team 980 for Not My Beat today. What kind of profile are we talking about, or any names that you've heard in terms of who could be next, and how empowered will that person be to do something different than the middle build plan that Ted Leonsis has wanted for decades?
I have a follow-up question to that, to which I don't have the answer. Whose plan was it? Was it truly Ted Leonsis's, or was it Tommy's, or was it both of them? Was it one of them?
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know.
a great question, but we've always heard Ted say that he didn't want to tank, right? He never wanted to bottom out, and he wasn't willing to. And he's also at times been vocal about, hey, I want to be in the playoffs. And a lot of folks have tied that to the gate that you get for the playoffs, and that if that's the difference between being in the red and being in the black, it would make sense that the owner would want to make the playoffs every year, even if that is perhaps prohibitive in a team building space. But it's obviously Grunfeld and Tommy certainly went along with it.
True, but they also work for someone.
Right.
So this is a question I don't think we'll ever answer. As for Ted's comment, we will never ever tank, which is actually a great piece of writing. He said it out loud, but it's so concise and so direct. The one bit of context that I think needs to be mentioned in there is that he was standing next to Adam Silver when he was posed that question. So what is he going to say? Can't say anything else. Either way, so what is your original question? I believe was, and my brain is so fried, Craig, I'm sorry. I almost forgot. What was the original question?
The original question is essentially like, who do we think is realistically on the table to be hired here, and how empowered will they be? And we just obviously talked about the empowered part. It depends on, whose plan was it, and has Ted changed his mind if it was his plan? I guess that kind of answers that part of it.
Okay, so there are only 30 of these jobs in the world. And so there are plenty of people who want the job and want it desperately. The question is, are they going to be able to get someone with a demonstrated track record of experience? And I ask that because such a person, in addition to wanting money, will want full autonomy on basketball matters up to, but not including, whether the team goes into the luxury tax. That should be the team owner's decision. Everything else, in an ideal world, if you hire someone who is truly competent and can really execute a vision, has to have full autonomy. And so that's why the questions you asked earlier are so important. And it's also important to note that the Wizards have a rather unusual setup where, for example, medical is not overseen by the head of basketball operations. That individual operates within his or her own silo. And I think that many of the most established people who could potentially take the job would want to have medical under their purview. And as for specific people, the name who is bandied about the most right now is Tim Conley, because of his ties to Baltimore, to D.C. He went to college here. He worked for the Wizards for many years and did so in college and right out of college. I think he may very well be the Wizards' number one choice here. If not number one, then 1B, right next to Masai Ujiri.
Masai obviously should be anyone's number one choice, in my humble opinion. For Connolly, though, he took the Minnesota job. He has president of basketball operations. It's hard to give a job higher than president. So how would they go about getting him? Is he out of contract at the end of this year? Which, by the way, would be incredible if he made the Rudy Gobert trade a year before his contract expired.
No, he's in the middle of he's at pretty much the start of a multi-year contract. This has just been, I believe, his first year in the role.
So how would they peel him away from Minnesota then? Is that feasible?
I don't think it's out of the question, but I need to know more, and we are endeavoring to learn more about whether he has an out within his contract. I don't have the answer right now, but that is a question that needs to be answered.
Totally, and I'm sure you will be answering it. Again, Josh Robbins is our guest. from The Athletic. He's had so much great coverage already on this, obviously working diligently. We're very appreciative of his time taking a few minutes here on the radio for us at this point in his reporting. So, Josh, I don't know if you've gotten to this one yet or what light you can shine on it, but you reported, along with Shams, I think it was a couple weeks back, that the Wizards had engaged Porzingis in contract extension talks. What does this move with Sheppard mean for those talks?
It means that unless Ted Leonsis takes that over, which I would be very surprised if he were to do, that those have been tabled, and that they would have to start anew with whomever Tommy Sheppard's successor will be. So this casts a fascinating amount of doubt as to whether Porzingis will indeed continue these extension talks. It takes two to talk, and who knows what Tommy's successor will want to do. And almost the same question applies to Kuzma. When Kuzma was not traded before the deadline, I jumped to the conclusion, which I think was accurate, that they have some understanding of what it would take to bring him back and a knowledge that they're willing to do that. And now that the chief basketball decision maker is no longer with the organization, where do they stand now? Certainly with far more doubt than where they were back in 3 months ago.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously Kyle can just look at the whole situation and decide, I don't care what you pay me. I don't like this. I'm out. Or, hey, I didn't really like Tommy. Like, sweet, let's get the new guy. Like, who knows where Kuzma is, and we'll obviously learn that. The last piece I want to talk to you about is Beal. He has the no trade clause. He was clearly upset at the end of the season. That frustration seemed to be pointed in a lot of different directions, and so many that it was hard to exactly pin down where it was the frustration was pointed at. What do you think this means for Beal? And if you were a new executive coming in, like, do you have the trade conversation with him pretty immediately, or do you think Leonsis is like, nope, your job is, that's the one thing where I put my foot down. Your job is to build around Bradley.
If it were to say, no, I put my foot down, you're going to be self-selecting who comes in here, who takes the job. As for what Bradley Beal wants, I do think he said himself he was frustrated with the season the team had and frustrated with his role in that, which is the fact that he only played in 50 games. But if the new person comes in and is granted full autonomy to make a franchise-changing shift, a full rebuild, you have to be honest with Brad and everybody else on the roster and say, look, this is the direction this team is taking. And I haven't spoken to Brad about it, but I cannot imagine that he would enjoy being on a team that's playing for lottery ball, ping pong balls. I just can't. And so I think that would spark certainly some difficult soul searching on his part as to what he wants from his future. But with the no trade clause, he will have a significant amount of authority to determine where he would go.
No doubt. And of course, the rich irony is he has been playing for a team that has been playing for lottery balls for most of the last 6 years. They just haven't been doing it on purpose like they perhaps might be for the next couple, depending on what they decide to do. Josh, great reporting around all of this. We look forward to hopefully talking to you again as more comes forward and you get the answers to some of the things that I know you're working on actively. So appreciate your time here on the radio. Always good to chat, and hope you get to relax a little bit this weekend.
I just need to get a little sleep.
A little bit. That would be helpful. Yeah. All right. Well, we won't bother you anymore. So hopefully that contributes.
Please do. This has been a pleasure.
Thanks, great, Greg. Josh. Thank you. Josh Robbins, everybody from The Athletic, with us here on the Team 980. All right. We're going to try to blitz through a couple of Wizards calls. Actually, Toby, let's do this. Let's just double up the break here. I'm going to go straight to the calls. We'll double up the break, and then we'll make a determination at 5:30 if we keep going on Wizards or whether we get some Commanders talk and you hear from RIvera and Martin Mayhew. But folks have been waiting patiently. We're back in baseball stuff. We're running a little heavy anyway. Let's just go straight to the calls. Let's go to Little. Little, thanks for holding. You're on the Hoffman Show. What you think of the Sheppard move and where the team goes from here?
What's up, Hoff? Man, I go to a lot of games, man. We got the players, man. Well, number one, we go back and we remember Bill putting up 30 points a game with Westbrook.
Sure.
Westbrook like to push the ball. Westbrook like to push the ball. Why we can't get a Derby in at the pump sometime and Goodwin in the pump with Brill and run Bill off the picks. We got a big man. Bill don't need to touch the ball at all. Keep him running off a pick. That's where he put his numbers up, man. We got a big man that can go outside, hit the three. Okay, we keep him out there. Then we got a one-on-one man in Kuz. You open up the floor for him, man. Come on, coach. Coach, the coach got to sit down and watch some film, man. You got a one-on-one player, man, to get hot and get on the roll like Kuz. You open up the side of the floor for him. It's common sense basketball, man. We got Daniel Gavin.
So hold on. Little. You think that Wes Unseld Jr., who is a professional basketball coach, can't figure out common sense basketball? You don't think it's a little more complicated?
Hoff, let me say that evidently I'm a football man. I can see what's going on. I'm there watching the game.
So you're a football man trying to give a professional basketball coach basketball advice.
No, I'm just saying he got to look at film and see what kind of players he got. We got two guys that like to run. Then we got a point guard.
Right.
We got from Denver.
Thanks for the call, Little. I think he knows. I think that I do agree they need to get more up tempo, get out in space a little bit more. But like, here's the problem with the pace and, if you want to go they need to pace and space. With what shooters? They don't have good three-point shooters. Like, Porzingis is good. I'll give you that. Kispert's a really good shooter. Brad has been up and down, but finished this year well. But it's not like these other teams, like Milwaukee's got like 3-4 dudes that are 40+%. Like, multiple great shooters, and then a bunch of other dudes who are good, and then like 2 or 3 other guys who on any given night can catch fire. Well, Wizards don't have that. And yes, could they get out and run more? Yes, but if anybody is going to call the show, I'm just going to save you your phone call right now. If you are going to call the show and point to some recent history as some example of success, I'm not really going to take your call for that long, not because I'm trying to be rude, but just because this is my retort. They haven't won 50 games since the late 1970s. Nothing you prescribe as success, to me, is success. I'm not trying to make the playoffs. I'm trying to contend for at least a conference championship, nevertheless an NBA championship. So if your grand plan is return to the days where if everything goes right, you win 48 games, I'm not interested in your plan. And if I'm being honest with you, sometimes uncomfortable truth is needed from your old friend, the radio host. You shouldn't like your plan either. So don't call me and tell me to go back to the Russell Westbrook days. That's at least they made the playoffs that year. I think they were still under 500. So, not great. Let's go to Lap. Lap, what's up, man?
Hey, what's up, Craig? Hey, man, this is so hilarious to me because I was going to call you the other day and mess with you with the Tommy Sheppard thing. And then when I checked my phone today, I was like, oh, my goodness, he's fired, because of what he said to you in the interview because he was like he listens to you or whatever. And so that was just too funny, man. I was going to mess with you one day, but I was like, hey, it's perfect to call him now that this has happened. I'm glad Tommy is gone, man. I mean, I don't like to see nobody lose their job or anything like that, but I'm glad he's gone because he's just not thinking, with reality, man. And he's just like behind the times. And then Ernie Grunfeld did better than him. I'm sorry. We went to the playoffs at least 8 times with him. I mean, but I don't know what Tommy has done. I mean, he's done good with the money and, getting some players that we didn't think we could possibly get, and that was fine. But as far as this building and being a contender, it's like, when are we going to get to that point? And that's what I've been saying for years.
And that was my thing with him, Lap, in that interview was he was like, oh, it takes patience. And I'm like, look who you're telling to be patient. Like, what are you talking about?
I'm a diehard Wizard fan, man, and I was like, what in the world did you just say?
Right. Lap, appreciate the call. Thank you, brother. I gotta let you run so we can get through some of these other ones, but I appreciate it as always. Let's go to Ron in Southeast D.C. Ron, thanks for holding. Appreciate it. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, appreciate you for having this topic, huh?
Absolutely, bro.
I agree with you, and I'm so happy to hear you share that mediocrity is not the goal that we want. As Wizards fans have been so patient, I believe that they suffer from Stockholm syndrome, man. That they're so happy to be mediocre and just make the play-in instead of trying to get a championship. That's what we want to compete for, a championship, a conference championship, the NBA championship. So to your point, and I just called to say this, blow it up, man. Put a bomb to it, hit the reset button like I do on my computer. Hopefully get a good talent evaluator in here, some good player development in here, and get somebody to pick some good young boys, get some assets, man. Do it, Danny Ainge. Come on, get. I'm so frustrated that I'm going to end the call and say this: reset it and attempt to compete for a championship by resetting the culture. That's one of the reasons I believe that this is just wipe them all out. We got to get rid of the culture that we have.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And actually, Ron, I appreciate the call. And not just because you agree with me. I love, CK and I were talking about this last night after we got done with our bonus hour, our breaking news hour. It was a reminder, as so many of you called in and people tweeted in and everything, that like there is a really, really passionate fan base for the Wizards here in DC, and they just want to see success. And sure, people have a different idea of how to get there, but like the passion is there. And the people that still care, you can't kill the rest of them off with apathy and mediocrity. We had someone call last night who had been a season ticket holder for 27 years, and this was their breaking point. Before, like, they had not renewed, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, let's see what happens now that Sheppard's gone. Might have to call my ticket rep back, depending on what happens. But you need a plan. You need hope. It's one thing to win 35 games when you're the Orlando Magic with Paolo Banchero and, Markelle Fultz looks like a great sixth man who they've kind of rehabilitated over the last couple of years. You're going to have to take some chances like that. All the Cole Anthonys of the world, like they have a good young team. Wagner down there. I think they got two Wagners down there. One of whom used to play here. If you're going to win 35 games, that's how you win 35 games. I'm not saying you can't win 42 games, in the next 3 years or you're failing. You just got to be winning 40 games on the way up. You can't win 35 games in the year that you're supposed to be competing. That ain't going to work. All right, last one. Let's go to Robert in Fairfax. Robert, close us out here on the Wizards. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Yeah, Greg. Dan Snyder selling the Commanders. Tommy Sheppard fired, man. It's like a new era in Wizards sports. I'm excited, man. I mean, Commanders about to take off. Wizards about to take off. I mean, look, I give Ted Leonsis some benefit of the doubt, okay? He did win with the Caps. The Mystics are winning. He does kind of know what success is like. Let's all be optimistic. I think change is coming. Why would you hire a new GM just to re-sign Kuz and KP and retain Brad? I mean, Tommy could have done that. I think change is coming. I'm optimistic about that. And, I mean, come on, let's go. I'm excited. Also, I don't think Wes Unseld Jr. is a problem. I think he can only work with what he's got. I mean, I find him to be he might not be the solution, but I don't think he's a problem.
Robert, that's very well put. Thank you. And I'm glad you brought Wes back up because that's the other thing I was going to say. I think Wes Unseld Jr. with young players would set a great culture. I don't know that he's ultimately a B to C coach. I've talked about this a lot, but for those that are unfamiliar with my analogy, some coaches are A to B coaches, some coaches are B to C coaches. I think Ron Rivera is an A to B coach. C stands for championship. I think you need that next level coach to really compete at the highest level. But I think that there are coaches that are excellent with young players, can help establish a culture, that are patient and are willing to work with guys. And I think Wes Unseld is that type of guy. I think potentially over the long term, because Wes is still relatively young, like I think Wes could develop into an excellent, excellent high-level coach. He could be like a Mike Brown who maybe in 10 years he gets the right job after getting fired once or twice and ultimately is a excellent coach that is, winning a coach of the year like Mike Brown just did. I think that's possible. And that was Brown's background. He was like defensive assistant, 10 years ago, gets elevated in Cleveland, coaches LeBron to 60 wins. And then obviously the Lakers thing didn't work out, but he ultimately gets the Sacramento job and has learned along the way by being under great coaches. So could that be Wes? And unfortunately for us in D.C., this is his first stop, not the one where he makes it. I think that's probably true. But if you blow it up, I don't think Wes Unselt's a bad guy to have. I think, his intelligence and his demeanor with young players could be fantastic. And then if ultimately you need to move on once you get some of the talent in here to a guy that's going to push in a different way, maybe it's just you need a new voice at that point. I think that could be a possibility as well. All right. When we get back, we are going to shift gears to the Commanders. We'll do Commanders for the next hour or so, get back to some NBA later on in the show. But coming up next, RIvera and Martin Mayhew had their pre-draft press conference today. You'll hear from both men next on The Hoffman Show.
The potential end.
Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And we're streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. Now you might be going, why do I want to watch a radio show? Well, on most days when Anthony's here, Toby's doing a great job today. And we'll have Toby make his stream debut in a moment here. But most days when Anthony's here, you get some extra dancing on the stream, which is nice. If you want to be highly entertained by Anthony Haney, just showing off his incredible coordination and rhythm, that's a good reason to watch on the stream. But also, like, if you got a smart TV, and like, let's say you're listening to the show at home, and you got the Odyssey app going on your phone, whatever, great. Love that. Another option for you would be to go to the YouTube app on your smart TV, make sure you're subscribed to the Team 980, and then anytime we're live, it's going to be in your suggestions or your subscriptions tab. So you can just go to that and it's put us on in the background. It's like you're watching a TV show. It's the same exact thing. So you can do that. Obviously, we love you using the Odyssey app. I think my bosses probably prefer that, but I'm just saying, here for the user experience. Smart TV, YouTube app, Team 980. Watch us live every day. All right. Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew. They are the men in charge of the franchise. They spoke today, a week out from the NFL draft. By the way, if you had told me on like Tuesday that we would be doing mostly Wizards on our Thursday show 1 week from the NFL draft, I would have laughed in your face. But that's what happens when they fire the GM. But here we are. And the Commanders feel really good about where they are. And they've made that clear every opportunity they possibly can, that they are in good shape. And Martin Mayhew and Ron Rivera said that happened because of what they did in free agency.
I think a lot of things that we did in free agency really helped us an awful lot. I thought Martin and the personnel group really came to us with a lot of positive players to look at. We were able to choose, several guys that we feel very strongly about. We took a couple starters from other teams and, put them on our roster, and we feel like we did some good things. I think a lot of things that we did.
Turn the loop function off on that today. There you go. I mean, that was kind of the theme of like, and that's what they've been saying all along. Owners meetings, combine, like they just feel, I guess not combine because they haven't free agency yet, but they feel really good about their roster, and I don't think they're wrong. I don't know that they should feel great about their roster. I think there's obviously a lot of upgrading potential at a lot of positions, but I don't think they're dead in the water at any position. I think their depth is in serious need of upgrade at some positions. But in terms of their starters, outside of maybe center, and then left guard, depending on the Chris Paul situation, is he good now after a year of learning? I think that we're in a big TBD on that, but they're not dead at any position. One thing that I've wondered a lot along those lines is there's all this talk that they're going to take an O-lineman at 16. And my question is, what spot? Like, what are you doing with that O-lineman? And it doesn't seem like you're not taking a center there, and you've got this plan at left guard for a couple of young guys to see which one can win the position. Right guard's now Cosme. That's set because you used a second rounder on him. You bumped him inside and said, young man, this is your future. Yeah, I just used the Ron Rivera, young man. What you going to do about it? And then at right tackle, you just signed Andrew Wiley, and at left tackle, you got Charles Leno. So what exactly linemen are you looking at? Again, I think you can upgrade on most of those guys except for Cosme. So what exactly are we talking about with this O-line? Here's what Rivera and Mayhew said today.
The great thing about Andrew and Nick and Trenton actually is their position flexibility and versatility. Trenton's played pretty much everywhere except center. Andrew's played guard and tackle, and then Nick has played center and guard. So we have the flexibility there to go anywhere in the draft, add somebody, and then put the pieces wherever the pieces line up.
Andrew Wiley, get ready to play left guard. I genuinely think that is one of the – maybe I'll do this next week, like my 3 most likely or 5 most likely predictions for the draft. If I had to pick, I think it'll be one of these 5 players. And one of my players is probably going to be Darnell Wright. Now, the only way that he would not make my list is if everyone keeps mocking him at 9 to Chicago, because then I'm not going to waste my selections on a guy who I don't think is going to be there. And I think that is possible. But I'd be very intrigued to see if they would go after Wright, who's considered the best right tackle in this draft. And so if they get him at 16, I don't think they're going to start him at guard. They could. They could kick him to left guard or kick Cosme to left guard and put Wright at right guard. But ultimately, I think they'd probably just go ahead and start him at tackle. As long as he's, shows well in camp, they can always have, Wiley taking snaps at right tackle, and they probably would as a part of a regular rotation in case of emergency. Good O-line coaches do that. That's a regular thing. But you sign the guy to play right tackle. If he winds up playing guard, which he might be better at, okay, fine. I'm fine with that. But what I'm happy about is hearing them actually admit that, because that has not been something that they have been keen on doing. They've been pretty consistent that, he's got position flex, but he's our right tackle. Well, that's as close to as what we've gotten saying otherwise. Of course, part of that whole process is Eric Bieniemy and what he thinks of everything, Wiley and Bieniemy together in Kansas City, specific to that move. Here was Rivera when asked about Bieniemy's input on the process so far.
It's been very interesting, very energetic. I mean, the dude is constantly on the go. I love his responses to the readings. I love his comments. His insight is very good. We've all really pretty much have learned very quickly what he's looking for what we want to do offensively and how he sees players fitting. And that was one of the really good things that as I said, when I was going through the process of finding the new OC, that was one of the things that I really liked, was listening to him talk about how our current players fit for what he wants to do. And that was a big plus. So now listening to it again, I get a little bit more of an education to understand, what he's looking for and what he's expecting out of guys.
Sounds like he's going to have a fairly heavy / has had. And that's the other thing too. If they come up at 16, it's not like Eric Bieniemy is going to run up to the front of the room and be like, "We got to take this guy." He might, when they go around the room, he might pound the table for someone and say, "I believe in this guy. I want him." But it's Rivera and Mayhew, and to an extent Mayhew's call. But ultimately, and actually, I'll play this if I can find it real quick. There's a lot of bites here. Where's the funny one I asked for? Toby, do you see what number it is? I'm going down this list. Oh, there it is. 17. Rivera or Mayhew was asked, "Hey, when it's your turn, and if there's two players you got to decide between, especially if it's two players, one maybe is an upside play, one's a little more sure thing. How do you decide between the two?"
If you get on the clock and there's two guys and one's got maybe the higher floor but maybe not as much potential in your evaluation, but then another guy's got maybe the lower floor this year but a higher potential for the future, do you have a mechanism to kind of decide which one of those trumps the other?
Yes, I will look at Coach and ask him which one he wants.
That was not a fake laugh from Rivera. That was a real laugh. If you were watching the video of the press conference earlier, that was a hearty chuckle from Ron Rivera, which says to me a couple of things. One, Rivera, remember, is not entering this final year of his deal, but is entering a critical year where he's got to win now. So I tend to think that Rivera would probably not go for the upside play. Give me someone who can help me win right now. But two, it's a reminder of who's in charge. Yeah, Martin Mayhew's the GM, but Rivera certainly, and Mayhew's doing real GM stuff, right? He's setting the board. The coaching staff is the coaching staff. But ultimately, when it comes down to the decision, Rivera is the ultimate football decision maker here. But back to Bieniemy, he's been influencing this process all along. They have meetings between front office and coaching staff, and it's like, hey, what are you looking for? Because the scouts have kind of a list of traits, and it's like, okay, this guy does this thing very well. He runs this. His arm length is this. And Bieniemy's like, I'm looking for these traits. I'm looking for this technique. And then it's the scout's job to mix and match, or not mix, but match the desires and the available players. So it sounds like Bieniemy's had a pretty heavy influence on the process already. He's a very clear communicator, and he's done a good job of getting across what he wants, which is nice. Does he potentially want a new quarterback? That is a very interesting question, and it became far more interesting when Ian Rappaport, who, as far as we know, has a pretty good relationship with Ron Rivera, went on NFL Network today and said, don't be surprised if the Commanders go quarterback. What if they go through it, or, don't be surprised, I guess, if the Commanders say go quarterback. That was the general crux of it. They brought in a few guys for their visits, yada, yada, yada. But what do you make of that? And do you think that quarterback in, let's say, the first 2 rounds is a good idea? Toby, that sounds like a good question to ask callers. I say we do that next. Toby, I'm also interested in your take. So, Toby and I'll toss that around, and we'll take your calls. Quarterback in the first 2 rounds. Thoughts on it? 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show. Let's tell you what's trending.
Here's what's trending.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/@theteam980, taking your calls on whether or not the Commanders should be considering a quarterback in the first 2 rounds at 301-230-0980. By the way, Toby, wave hi to the people on the internet. All right, there's Toby. So first, real quick, before we get our takes in on this, let's hear RIvera and Mayhew talk about their current quarterback room, because they definitely need to add a third, but whether or not that's in the draft and certainly in the draft high, that is a much heavier debate.
You know, as far as the quarterback position goes, we feel very comfortable with the guys we have. I mean, if you think about it, we have a young guy in Sam that, coming out at one point was rated very high. We were fortunate, we believe, to get him where we got him. We get Jacoby Brissett coming off of, arguably one of his better years as a player. And it's one of those things that's funny because typically a lot of times you get veteran quarterbacks, it's, they're coming off of tough times. So we feel good about what we did there as well, and we'll see what happens. As far as...
So they're happy. I don't expect them to say anything different. And this could be one of those where I can picture Ron now on Friday after they take Hendon Hooker in the second round going, what was I going to do? Tell you? Like, well, of course, what's he going to say? So I don't love it. I don't like the idea of taking quarterback early in this draft. Toby, are you with me, or do you think that, like, if Hendon Hooker's staring you in the face at 47, you better well take him?
I'm generally not one.
Looks like we got those mics are brutal.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, I'm generally not one. It's weird looking. I'm generally not.
He had a nice double mic situation, double barrel microphones.
I'm generally not one that was thinking quarterback early on makes much sense, but last segment, hearing Bieniemy is going to have some input. If he's banging the table for a quarterback and he's coming off of seeing Patrick Mahomes, and I'm sure he was a part of the process maybe there. I can't remember when he got to Kansas City.
Yeah, he's been there for a while. He was less involved in the quarterback stuff when they drafted Mahomes, but pretty quickly was elevated, if I have my timeline correct.
But either way, like, if he sees something in a quarterback, whether it's 16, I don't know that I'd like that, but if it's Hooker in the second round, I wouldn't mind that. I'm not big on the quarterbacks outside of the top 2, to be honest, so I wouldn't necessarily love it if they took a quarterback, but if it comes out that Bieniemy wanted a guy, I'll give the benefit of the doubt to Bieniemy.
I am not going to disagree with anything you said. I would say this. First, it comes down to, do you love the guy? Because if you watch Hendon Hooker and you're like, this dude's got it. And, like, I don't know, right now, because I read a bunch of stories today, I'm big on, like, the S2 cognition test. I'm like, man, if he's got it on the S2, basically the 10-second version is it's this test that can actually measure how well any player, but in this case a quarterback, processes information. And the most successful guys in the league have scored very well on this test. It's not everything, but it's a big deal. And so if he's got like a 95th percentile on the S2 cognition test, and you love him on the board, and you think he's got great leadership skills, and you're not concerned about the ACL, and you're willing to take that risk, okay. Like, I can't argue with you if you think he's your quarterback of the future, but I just don't see anybody in this class being better at all that stuff in terms of the chances of success. Like, is your lottery ticket a better ticket? If wish that actually existed in the lottery, where you like, yeah, I think I'm gonna win. But is your lottery ticket any more likely to succeed than it is with Sam Howell? And at that point, you might as well just try with Howell and give Howell an extra player to succeed / build your roster otherwise at corner, at outside, or at edge, if you want to ensure that position, at offensive lineman, whatever.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me because you almost have the flip side on guys in the draft this year as opposed to what Sam Howell was. With Howell, he was a guy that was a first-round guy that fell because of a subpar last season at North Carolina. You have guys like Hooker, who I don't think he was really on anybody's radar going into the draft, much less in the first 2 rounds. And now he's going to be possibly a first-round quarterback because someone wants to get that extra year. I don't know that I want that. Will Levis, I think, was someone that was talked about a little bit, but he's kind of fallen down draft boards now a little bit after some of the stuff coming out with all the draft process. So I don't know if I'm going to trust any of those guys over what you have in Sam Howell. You already got this guy He's going to be cheaper than a first or second round quarterback. The only thing is you already used one of the 4 years. So
Right.
if you wanted to try and get a fifth year on a guy, maybe you'd go with it. But I don't know outside of Stroud or Young if I'm going to look at a guy and think they're going to be exponentially better than what you have in Sam Howell.
And the guy that keeps getting mentioned in all this is Hooker, because it doesn't seem like they're going to be in position. I mean, Levis, they could be in position to draft. He might fall to them at 16. But with Hooker specifically, like, he's older than Howell. Like, again, the contract length, if you can get 5 years of rookie contract control versus the 3 you have remaining on Howell, I get that. But, like, Sam Howell at the end of his contract, I think will be the age that Hooker is now. Which, by the way, Ron was asked today about drafting older prospects, since there are so many more with guys with COVID years coming out, 5-6 year players that are, instead of being 21, 22, are 24, 25. Here's Rivera.
Well, that does come up. There's some guys that are 24 and 25, and I think there's a couple of even 26 that are coming out that have picked up the extra year, have had a redshirt year. They're coming out after 6 or 7 years.
Looking at you, Stetson Bennett.
Again, you're looking at guys a little bit more mature. On the other hand, so there's some positives and negatives to it. Their game is developed. They've been in several different systems, so those are things that you believe that will benefit them. But at the same time, you draft a guy like that, and he may not have the 10-year career because he's already 25 or 26.
The way quarterbacks are playing now, that seems less of a big deal to me than, like, my thing with Hooker all along has been he wasn't really that great until he was way older than everybody else. And, like, at what point are you just beating up on kids because you're an adult? And between that and the ACL, I'm real leery of Hendon Hooker. But, I mean, also watching some, like, I get why people love him. Like, super accurate, good decision maker, seems to be a great kid with very excellent leadership skills. But I have a hard time with the 25-year-old who dominated college football for not that long, who also, by the way, is coming off a torn ACL. So
I have less of an issue with the age thing and more so from what I've heard from experts in the film industry talking about how at Tennessee he didn't have to make all that many reads.
That's also true.
That's more so my concern is if he's going to come to the NFL and then you add on he's going to have to develop for 2 years, then you're getting into the point where the age really matters.
Right. Well, and that Josh Heupel offense hasn't exactly produced studs in the NFL. Great college players. But, like, when Sam Bradford's probably about as good as you've done, like, that's not excellent. And, by the way, it's one thing if that kid is 20 coming out of a Josh Heupel system and he's still at an age where learning comes a little bit easier and you're far, far, far away from your ceiling. That's the other problem is, like, a 25-year-old is much closer to their ceiling than a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old. And that's the reality that any team that drafts Hendon Hooker is going to have to deal with. If you're a team like Minnesota and you've got Kevin O'Connell and you feel like he could be a quarterback whisperer and in a year behind Kirk Cousins he can get what he needs, fine. If you're these guys and you got Brissett and you got Howell, I'd much rather take someone late in the draft that's a flyer that just fills my third quarterback spot and use those first couple picks on something else. All right, when we get back, who are the players that are going to shape this NFL draft? That is the question we asked on our podcast, Take Command, and it was not just myself and Logan Paulson talking for once. No. We did a crossover episode with In the Huddle with Jason La Canfora and Brian Baldinger, and we all picked a player that we think will shape next week's NFL draft. That conversation for you next here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/@theteam980. All right, each and every Tuesday and Thursday, brand new editions of Take Command hit your audio feeds. You can subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey app, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And this week we had a very, very special edition of Take Command. We got to cross over with Jason Lockenfora and Brian Baldinger at In the Huddle, our flagship NFL podcast. You get all of Baldy's breakdowns and everything that Baldy and all the inside info from JLC there. And we had a big discussion about Jalen Hurts and what it means for the NFC East because we recorded the day after the news broke on that. So definitely check out the full podcast for more on that. But then we got into what really brought us together, which is the NFL draft. And I asked everybody at our virtual roundtable, who's the one player that's going to shape the first round of the NFL draft? We'll start with Logan Paulson's answer and go from there here on a Take Command Thursday on the Team 980.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
It's Take Command and In the Huddle crossover episode from Odyssey Sports. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watching or listening right now. All right, let's do this. Let's all pick one player quickly, like 60 to 90 seconds apiece. Players that we think will shape the draft. Someone who, hey, when this guy goes, it's going to help shape how everything goes after him. Could be one of the quarterbacks. Could be, a player that maybe is drafted above what his position value truly is. Someone else who's just got your eye in this draft that you think is going to shape specifically the first round. Of course, worth mentioning here that Baldy and JLC will be hosting our draft show for Odyssey. You can watch that on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page and on Twitch. Logan, I'll start with you. Who's the guy that you think is going to shape the first round of the NFL draft? I'll give you first crack at it.
I mean, this is cheating because it's so obvious, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that if Bryce Young goes number one and the Houston Texans are not sold on C.J. Stroud, that's going to make one of those quarterbacks fall, Will Levis or C.J. Stroud, right? Because if C.J. Stroud is the consensus number two, Houston doesn't take him, Arizona doesn't take him, let's say Indianapolis takes him, then Will Levis is on a skid. Anthony Richardson hasn't been selected yet. So as much as that's like a boring thing to say, like that first pick is going to be demonstratively dramatic in terms of the effect of the top 10 and where those quarterbacks fall. And it could lead to a situation where, a really good football player potentially slides down into that kind of mid-20 range and the team gets really excited. So, that's kind of the most boring one, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that first pick is very significant.
Yeah, and there's been some rumors that Houston might not actually go quarterback at two.
Right.
That they might sit out a year and try to get in the Caleb Williams street sweepstakes next year. So that becomes super interesting if the guy that they don't like winds up falling. It seems like Bryce Young's headed to Carolina, but we'll see. All right, Baldy, who's the guy for you that shapes the first round?
Well, I got to believe Jalen Carter, at this point, because, like Jeffrey Simmons just got a $100 million deal in Tennessee last week, and rightfully so. I mean, he's been a dominant defensive tackle for the Tennessee Titans, and they've been the top defensive front in football at the very top over the last 3 years with him in there. And if you look at Jalen Carter, to me, he looks like a bigger, more athletic Jeffrey Simmons. So, obviously there's these issues off the field, and we don't need to go into any of it. But there's also a question of just his production at Georgia. And, his 3.5 sacks, anything to get excited about. Georgia runs a crazy system. Kirby Smart's smarter than all of us together. So I can't dispute what he does when you win back-to-back national championships. But, Jalen Carter could easily go number 3 to Arizona. There's no J.J. Watt. That would be a steal. If Indianapolis makes a trade with Houston and they lose to Forrest Buckner, they need somebody in the middle. If Seattle wants to be a Pete Carroll-built team, they don't look any further than Jalen Carter. Detroit is on the upcome. They've won 8 of their last 10 last year. You add Jalen Carter in there with Aiden Hutchinson and what they have, they get a whole lot better. I mean, you just go through the list. I mean, the Raiders have nobody to help out Max Crosby inside. The Atlanta Falcons, they've been adding defensive pieces and, different guys, Calais Campbell, but there's nobody like Jalen Carter. on that lineup. So you could just go team by team and go, he helps that team right away, having a beast like that in the middle. So to me, does he drop? Doesn't he drop? Where's he go? All that I think is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear everyone else's selection, but I wanted to ask you, Baldy, like, removing the legal stuff, the thing that gets me a little bit concerned about him is the work ethic stuff.
Yeah.
How do you weigh that? How do you weigh the risk of that, especially given, like you mentioned, he's a very special football player, very, very physically gifted, but I want to bet on a guy that's going to work, and I want to get your thoughts on that. Yeah.
So, 320-pound guys typically don't play every snap, like your defensive ends or your linebackers. So they're not that worried about making plays on the other side of the field. I'd like to see more effort. He couldn't finish his pro day. Like, he just was gassed. Now, there's extenuating
a lot of stuff.
There's really no excuse for that. It's embarrassing. I hope he's not Albert Haynesworth. I hope he's more Jeffrey Simmons, Chris Jones, Javon Hargrave, than what we saw from Haynesworth and what you saw from Haynesworth back in the day. But, that's why there could be a drop, because somebody's saying, like, man, I need a better motor, because ultimately all you want in all these draft visits, all these, all the things that we do over 4 months is you just want to find, like, does that guy's heart, is it all about football? And if it is, then he'll get in shape, he'll play to his talent. But if it isn't, you're going to have a problem on your hand.
That's why Detroit's one of my favorite landing spots for him. Like, get him in a room with Aiden Hutchinson, and let's see what happens. Because that dude's motor is...
Peer pressure is important.
Yeah.
Like, that happens.
Dan Campbell.
You want to play as hard as Aiden Hutchinson, or you want to look like... what it's like, Logan, being in that film room on Monday. You don't want to be that dog that everybody's looking at. You want to be that guy that is playing harder than everybody else.
Yeah. All right, Jason, your player that's going to shape the first round. Who you got?
Well, I'm going to go at it a little differently. I'm going to say two teams clustered together because I think they're wild cards. And I'm with you guys. I think Jalen Carter could be the first defensive player off the board. You can get pretty good odds on that if you're into wagering on such things. And I don't think he gets past Seattle, which means maybe Anderson falls a little bit because the high-end projection, the people I talk to, that I think he's he's a good football player. Is he going to be a great football player?
Right.
But I just keep coming back to Atlanta and the Raiders clustered together. Like, are we really buying that 85-year-old Arthur Blank is completely sold on Desmond Ridder? Like, don't they protest too much about how much they love Desmond Ridder? Because I'm old enough to remember them not playing him till they absolutely had to a year ago. They rode Marcus Mariota, who really liked their backup quarterback, would have ridden him. But now he's the solution. Okay. They've passed on a lot of quarterbacks. And I can understand Arthur Blank $50 million a year. But you don't want to take a flyer on one of these kids at $5 million a year? Because that's what Lamar cost his first 5 years, $33 million, $6 a year, right? So I'm not buying that they're in on a quarterback. And the same thing with the Raiders. Josh McDaniel, best way for him to buy himself a little more time from the owner and the fans, because he's already on the hot seat, is to take a quarterback, right? I mean, what else hope more than a first-round quarterback? He's one like Anthony Richardson, who, guess what's baked into the cake? Oh, I'm going to get a few years in all likelihood, right? Like, they've got so many holes. But quarterbacks got to be, like, is anybody buying Jimmy Garoppolo playing more than 10 games this year? If just one of those teams, right, if does one of those teams jump to 2 or jump to 3 all of a sudden to get a quarterback?
It's a really interesting thought, because it does seem like things always like that happen. Like, some team does something that you're not expecting, and so we'll see if that's one of the two teams. I'll say for me, the Richardson, and I'll count, like, in a way, I guess Jason's player is Richardson, and take him off the board for myself. My guy's Bijan Robinson, because he might be the best football player in the draft, but he plays a position that you don't take in the first round unless a guy's really special. But I know I had Eric Edholm from NFL Media, a guy we all know, on my show yesterday, and he's probably my favorite player in the draft. And if he's going to be LaDainian Tomlinson, that seems like someone that's worth taking in the first round. And could you see a team, by the way, Jason, like Atlanta, who wants to run the football more than anything else, take him in the top 10? you could also see him fall into the 20s. You could see him fall out of the first round. And so he's, if he, let's say, goes to Atlanta.
Oh, no, you can't. I'm not buying that.
I doubt he falls out of the first round, but
He's
like
not falling
he
out
could
of
fall
the
into the
first round.
20s.
No
He could
way.
fall into the 20s. And from there, who knows? But bigger point is like if he goes 7 to it or 8 to Atlanta, where everyone's mocking Christian Gonzalez, that bumps all the corners down. Like that reshapes the draft in a way that is really significant. So to me, Bijan's the guy that is the biggest wild card probably in this draft because he could shift every other position group because you never account for a running back in the top half of the first round.
Wait
Go
a second.
ahead, Logan.
So I just want to ask. So Jason, you don't see there's any way that he falls out of the first round? No way at all?
I'll just speak for Jason.
Yeah.
Like I don't believe, Logan, that he could ever get past Dallas at 26.
Right.
Like that's such a Dallas pick at 26. Fowler's coming off a broken foot. Zeke's not there. McCarthy has come out and said, I want to run the ball more and better than we did a year ago.
Right.
Like he's the perfect fit in that offense, which is a star-studded built team led by, Micah, Dak, CD. Like you'd add Bijan to that. Like Jerry Jones' head is going to pop off.
By the way, went to Texas, so he's a Texas guy.
Right.
Star power added there.
I just was thinking, from an analytics perspective, there are, I'd say, I don't know, probably 15 teams that I spoke with at the Combine that were basically like, we won't take a running back in the first round no matter what. But I guess, like you've talked about on your podcast before, you just need one team. And I do think that, Dallas would die if that happens. So that's a great point.
Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart. live as well on the free Odyssey app. So yesterday, about 6:52-ish, Woj reports, and 6:54, the press release is out, that Tommy Sheppard is out, released from his duties as Wizards president and general manager, according to said press release. But there was another part of that press release that really struck me that I thought was really interesting and is perhaps a little terrifying about the future of the Washington Wizards. Ted Leonsis says, very simply, very succinctly, Tommy Sheppard's failure to make the playoffs the last 2 years is essentially the reason he's gone. It's very disappointing to our fans, which gives big grandmother energy. It's very disappointing. But whatever. Maybe that's just my own grandmother. Hi, Muriel. Hope you're listening today. Leonsis says, though, not making the playoffs. And look, it's a press release. I don't want to read too much into it. But this is how Ted chose to address it. So it's all we've got. Not only did Tommy not make the playoffs, or the play-in even, in a league where now over half the teams reach that threshold, he hasn't shown a proper direction. He hasn't shown the ability to draft well. He hasn't shown growth, progress. Hasn't built a contender. And I think when we talk about who the next executive for the Washington Wizards is going to be, we need to look at two very important things that are not determined by said executive. We need to determine what Ted Leonsis wants in terms of a ceiling and a floor. Because there are people, including my good friend Clinton Yates, who I actually don't know if normally he joins us on Fridays, but he's traveling tomorrow, so I don't know that he'll be able to join us. Point is, Yates has talked about this for years. Theodore, as he calls them, loves to make sure that his franchises are profitable. Nothing wrong with that as an owner, unless that's your primary objective over winning. Because sometimes it pays, literally, to be the 8th seed. The money you get for making the playoffs is significant. And if your business model, in a purely financial sense, puts you in the black, making a profit if you make the playoffs, and not making a profit if you miss them, and part of that calculation is not being in the luxury tax, for instance, which the Wizards have not really messed with a lot, then you might just have an owner who is happy to be the 6th seed, get in the playoffs, and never push the envelope on the luxury tax. But also, more importantly, the floor means you got to make the playoffs. Your window of what you're trying to land becomes very narrow. And it's like, hey, if someone gets hurt in our first-round series, maybe we'll even make the second round if the opposing team's best player gets hurt. Yay! That's not what I would be aiming for as an owner. I want to build a contender that would win a championship if you catch the breaks that every championship contender has to catch. Health, etc. I am not convinced, like some other folks seem to be, that Ted has completely changed his mind on this. I'm not convinced that he hasn't. I just would like to hear it. And we talked with Josh Robbins earlier of The Athletic, who does a great job covering the team. And Josh said two things that I think are really telling here. One, if Ted has the conversation with, a Tim Connolly, with whoever that he is trying to recruit here, and he, for instance, puts his foot down on Bradley Beal and says, no, I gave him a no-trade clause for a reason. We're not trading him. Don't even ask him about it. Do not talk about it. Do not mention it to his agent. Don't have him try to come to us. And if he comes to us, tell him that he made a commitment and he's going to stay here because we want him here. Then he is self-selecting who the next person is going to be. AKA, he's going to eliminate people who will be like, I'm not that interested. I don't want to come with handcuffs. I want to come with the freedom to do what I think we need to compete for a championship. And if Ted's serious about doing that, he'll allow that to happen. Again, I don't think that it's the worst reflection of Ted's character that he would like Bradley Beal to retire here and hang his number and be a good ambassador for the franchise. And, Ted is big on loyalty, and there are worse things you can be as a human. But that's not going to help you win in sports, in professional sports. You can be compassionate and human while also business savvy. And that just goes into how you make the transactions. You don't call people and be like, hey, we traded you. Sorry. See ya, sucker. You keep your stars in the loop. You let them know what's up. And if things develop, then it's not a surprise. And there's always going to be some hurt feelings, but eventually those wash away when the star comes back and receives the heartwarming video and the adulation from the fans and, maybe a job post-playing career as an ambassador. And the Wizards have done a really fantastic job as of late, especially bringing back alumni and honoring them. And people are into it, as they should be. I mean, the Arenas Jameson stuff this year, Caron Butler stuff was awesome. And so Ted had, and Candace Buckner wrote a great piece in the Washington Post about this. And she seems convinced, this is so un-Ted Leonsis-like that he had to have had this epiphany that this wasn't going to work and that he needs someone else. And, hey, he's hiring someone from outside the organization. Yes, but it's not until we see him actually greenlight the kind of rebuild that this is going to take. And it doesn't have to be the process. I think that's also gotten twisted, too. When I say you have to blow it up, it doesn't mean you have to commit to being bad for 5 years like Philly did. You don't have to go full the process, even though tell me they're kind of bad for the next couple of years, but they're going to draft the next Joel Embiid, who's about to win league MVP. I'd sign up for that. But a lot of people won't. Fine. But you need probably a year or two of being bad. You need to accumulate assets. You need to get a really good draft pick. You need to acquire more assets by trading some of the pieces you have now, including Beal. And once you trade Beal, that is considered blowing it up. However long it takes you to rebuild that's the construction project that follows the demolition. I'm in favor of the demolition, and the reason I'm in favor of the demolition is I don't see another path to build. This is the land that they own. There's not any more space to build on it. You have to knock something down. And so when Leonsis says, hey, Tommy didn't make the playoffs, that's why I fired him, I hope he realizes that the land that you're building on, we're not just trying to build another house with a roof over our head and be like, oh, hey, we're grateful for the roof. Yes, you should be grateful for a roof. But the apartment you get in your 20s that gets a roof over your head is not the same one you want when you have the best job in your career, at whatever age that is, at your maximum earning potential, and you've stacked some cash. Which is why when you look, down the hall in your apartment building and you're the Wizards and you see these rascally kids running around the Orlando Magic living in the same unit as you, that's not a good reflection of you. You don't get to call the front desk and complain about the kids. They're making the noise. You should have made some different decisions and moved out a couple of years ago. And so that to me is what I want to know from Ted Leonsis. If I get to interview him, which you bet your bottom dollar that we're asking, not that I expect that request to be granted, but we're certainly going to put it in. That is the nature of these things. That's not, I understand that owners don't do a lot of interviews, but hey, at the very least, I hope he holds a press conference. And maybe he winds up doing it when he hires the new guy. But the question needs to be asked. What's on the table? Are you willing to be bad to be good? Are you willing to do some franchise management? We won't use the word tanking. Some franchise management in order to get ultimately where you want to go, get the young talent that you need, become a team on the rise, not a team that has risen to the level of mediocrity for most of the last 50 years. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. We already got a couple folks on hold. Haven't even really asked for calls yet, so we'll get to your calls next. If you're on hold, stay there. We'll be back in 3 minutes. And if you're not on hold yet, but you'd like to be, get there. And then I'll answer your phone call on the other side. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls on the Washington Wizards the day after they fire Tommy Sheppard at 301-230-0980. That is where you can reach us. That is where Daryl has been patiently waiting on hold, and where we'll get to Rudy in just a second and anyone else who wants to chime in. Again, 301-230-0980. Daryl, though, get us started on the Wizards. Thanks for holding through the break, man.
So thank you, Craig. So I was like, Tommy Sheppard, thank God we finally got rid of him, because he didn't know how to draft well. Like, to be honest, we missed out on Trae Young, missed out on some good players, and it was just like, unfortunately, I was just like, every time we have a chance to get a good player, it's just like, unfortunately, we missed out on them. And then I'm just like, now I hope we get Masai Ujiri or Bob
Myers from the Warriors.
And so those are my two candidates that I hope we get. And we need to start being like contender like Boston Celtics and some other teams. Because
thanks for the call, Daryl. Yeah, I mean, if you can get one of the two best executives in basketball, that seems like a good job. I will say this about Bob Myers, though, even. Like, this job is hard. Bob Myers did a great job with Stephen Curry, you can't say enough about Bob Myers and the job he's done over the last decade, but even he has his misses. Like, they drafted James Wiseman, and most front office people in the league would have done the same. And maybe he still turns into a very good player. He looked a lot better in Detroit since the trade. Didn't really work out for him in Golden State. Jordan Poole may not be quite as good as we all thought he was. He's had a really, really off season after signing a massive extension. Obviously helped them win a title. You take that. Oh, darn. You're not as good after you helped us win a title. But he may not be the future piece that they thought. Moses Moody has been really inconsistent. Kuminga is a useful piece for them, but I don't think is growing at the rate that they want, where they really feel like they can entrust the franchise to a young core they had built moving forward. And everyone thought, oh my God, are the Warriors going to be the best thing in the NBA for the next decade too, with Poole, Kuminga, Wiseman, and Moody? No. My guess is in 3 years, Kuminga's the only one there. I think they might even move. If they lose in this opening round series to the Kings, I think everything's on the table for them. So we'll see. Masai's been incredible with what he's done, and his draft record is fantastic. But I think there are areas where you can also look at Masai. Like, this job is really hard, and the idea is to get as good as you can. I think Tim Connolly did a really good job building in Denver. He also made the Rudy Gobert trade in Minnesota. What the hell was that? So there are no perfect candidates, but I do think the criticism of Sheppard as a draft guy at this point is pretty well earned. Tommy's been in this organization a long time, and as a scout, he's been a part of the front offices that have not gotten a player to their second contract since Bradley Beal. That is an amazing, true fact. They have not had a player they've drafted re-sign with them on a second contract, that rookie extension, since Bradley Beal. Got to do better in roster management. You got to do better with your young guys and being able to retain your young talent if you want to be successful in this league. 301-230-0980. Let's go to Rudy in Glen Burnie talking whiz with us. Rudy, you're on the Hoffman Show. Rudy!
Hello.
There we are.
Hey, the Hoffman Show. Thank you, sir. Look, I think that he had the general manager did do some good things, but on this last draft, drafting Johnny Davis, who wasn't ready for the pros. It showed when he came in. He wasn't ready. And then to trade Rui to the Lakers for some peanuts and Kendrick Nunn. You could have swapped that and went to Minnesota, who was getting rid of Jared Vanderbilt, and the other player that went with him, put him on the team, made us better defensively, to go with our offensive.
You think Minnesota would have traded Jared Vanderbilt for Rui Hachimura?
What did the Lakers trade him for? What did the Lakers trade him?
Let's see. Jared.
Yeah, the Lakers didn't give them that much.
Vanderbilt. But here's the thing about most NBA trades. They're about finances as much as anything. The Lakers acquired D'Angelo Russell from Minnesota and guard Malik Beasley and forward Jared Vanderbilt from the Utah Jazz. It was announced in the trade the Lakers sent Russell Westbrook, Juan Toscano-Anderson, and Damian Jones, and a protected first-round pick to Utah and a future second-round pick. So they had to give up a first-round pick, and they traded Russell Westbrook and a couple of other pieces. Right. So, yeah, I don't think you were getting Jared Vanderbilt for Rui Hachimura.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm a little off on that. But it shows with that with the Johnny Davis trade, he Johnny Davis pick, he wasn't ready. Maybe he's getting ready. Maybe he may be better next year. I'm not for sure. But, and then to trade Rui and keep Avia, who's been, he hasn't been the same since Rui left. He's been on a downward slide more than anything.
I would disagree.
But I'll listen to you.
Rudy, thanks for the call. I just think we got some facts that are a little different. Seems like we're on the same page now on some of that. But I think Denny was better after Rui left. He had a great stretch immediately following. He did have a pretty significant dip, but he finished the season really strong. And he's just a better basketball player. And he's also a lot younger. Rui is, I want to say, like 24 years old. Rui Hachimura. Let's see. Rui Hachimura is 25. Denny Avia 21. And he's a significantly better defender. He's got the chance to be every bit the scorer that Rui is. Rui, yes, he's had 2 excellent playoff games. And I do wonder if that irritation that Ted has watching Rui with the Lakers put up 20-plus points in back-to-back playoff games could have potentially influenced his agitation towards Tommy. And I'd hope not, but it is what it is. But in the regular season, Rui Hachimura averaged 11.2 points per game. For his career, he's at 12.5 points per game. He's a very, very bad defender. He brings very little to the game other than scoring. And again, he averages 12.5 points per game. Meanwhile, Deni Avdija at 22 now, I beg your pardon, he turned 22 back in January, is, for his career, 8.1 points per game, but he's 5.5 rebounds and a plus defender. And in his last 15 games of the season, he averaged 15 points per when he got a few more shots. Denny's got a lot of growing to do, and I'm not telling you he's a good NBA player at this point, but I would have picked Avdija over Hachimura as well. And the idea that Rui is actually killing it in Los Angeles because he had 2 good playoff games is a complete misreading of what Rui Hachimura was in Los Angeles. We're about the same as he was here. Once a week, he pops up with a very, very impressive scoring performance in which he still is not very good in most of the other areas that matter in NBA basketball. 301-230-0980. By the way, on Johnny Davis, I said this at the end of the year. I'm not going to back off it. I think Johnny Davis might turn out to be a pretty good basketball player. There's just stuff with him that I'm like, whoa, that's good. And Tommy, ironically, who's got a background in PR, made a horrendous mistake in saying that Johnny Davis was going to be ready to go immediately. If he had just said, we think he's going to be an all-star in the future, but it's going to take some time, then fine. I also don't know that's a guy you take with the 10th pick, but it is when you think you have a lot of years left in job security, and Tommy Sheppard sure turned out to not be correct on that, as the way things fell. Not to be flippant about someone losing their job, but yikes. Let's go to Dre in Lorton. Dre, you're on the Hoffman Show talking Wizards.
What's up, Mr. Hoffman? How you doing?
I'm good, bro. I'm good. What you got on Sheppard and where the Wizards go from here?
I don't know, man. They have so many problems. It finally feels like they're addressing what the real issues are. I think the issues are player development, honestly. It doesn't matter who they draft. It just seems like they draft guys, and in a few years they're out of here. And I don't understand, how you can, pay a guy $250 million and have no expectation to win. And that goes directly to player development. You're overpaying talent because you can't develop players around them. So I think that's the problem, man. And I don't really know how they're going to fix it other than starting over.
Yeah, Dre, it's a really interesting thought. Thanks for the call. Because that has been something that is consistent across multiple coaching staffs. It's something that Scott Brooks was supposed to be great at. Everyone looked at what he did in Oklahoma City because, yes, Westbrook and Durant were awesome, and they were both top 5 picks, and Harden was there as well, but I think what we've seen is the magic was Oklahoma City and what they do in terms of player development as an organization, which is front office down. It wasn't so much Scott Brooks and his coaching staff. That's the magic. And Durant was always going to be Durant, but the way that Westbrook developed, for better and for worse, by the way, that's like a fun, different sidebar for another day. But there's a magic in Oklahoma City with the way they do things. And by the way, it's why one of the organizations I would look at to poach from is Oklahoma City. Like, who's their assistant GM, and or how much money can I possibly pay Sam Presti to leave? I don't think that's possible. He very much likes it in Oklahoma City, and he's about to have another team that's competitive for the better part of the next decade. But who's the assistant GM, and can they bring some of that magic here? But the player development thing, I think also is the systems you have in place. One, are you getting guys that are developable? You get guys that are the right mix of mental and physical traits, matched up with the correct learning styles of the coaches, and whatever other resources you need to give them in your basketball operation to help them get along. The Go-Go has been a very good G League team, so there are some pieces in place here, but how do you get it to translate to the NBA level? It's something they haven't done, and whether that's misses in scouting or player development, they've got to fix it. Otherwise, like Dre said, it doesn't really matter what you do because nothing will matter for them moving forward, unless you get like a LeBron where the guy that you draft is so freaking good that he overrides every other flaw in your organization and makes you competitive. But even then, to win a championship, you really need to support that player, and especially if you want to keep them over the long term. All right, maybe you got time for one more call next, but Real Things, Real People said into real microphones. I can't believe I'm going to give Dylan Brooks the time of day, but we might just have to play the Dylan Brooks sound next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live as well on the free Odyssey app.
Here's what.
on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Of course, streaming live on YouTube as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. And big shout out to Toby filling in for Anthony today. And Toby, about, I don't know, an hour ago, probably in one of our segments, I got up in the break and was like, all right, I'm going to go get some water. And did you see what I came back with?
I did. It is not a regular water, but a sparkling water.
Yeah. Also, what's going on with your mic over there? Anthony has been fighting with those mics for weeks.
Idea.
Which mic are you on? Does it say?
How about we try all of them?
If you just hit that one of whatever you just turned on.
I'm just going to turn on all of them.
But now we still got a weird. I don't know what's going on.
This better?
Yeah.
There we go.
There he is.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the mics.
I feel like they just switch sometimes. It's very bizarre. It's very bizarre. But yeah, I did not grab a bottle of regular water. I grabbed, only for the purposes of radio, what I will call a bottle of idiot water. Why did I do this? I don't know. I never drink sparkling water. I always, yes, do you want some sparkling or flat? I'll take the flat water. Boring old plain tap flat water's fine for me. And normally I have a water bottle. I'm also just terrible sustainability here. I'm so sorry. I promise I will recycle this bottle. Fully recyclable or replace cap on empty bottle. Okay, I will. I promise. But I took my water bottle home to wash it, and I keep forgetting to bring it back. So I bought a water bottle, and I decided, because I wanted something like crisp and refreshing, that I would get sparkling water. Here's the problem, and why with that, when you're a radio host, and why I'm calling this a bottle of idiot water. Because it's carbonated, and carbonated drinks make you want to belch, and belching is bad if you're a radio host. What am I doing?
Yeah, it's not ideal.
And so now what I've been doing is I'm just like sitting here, in case anyone thought I was kidding, to hear the bubble there. It's like, let's blow out some of the air. I take these little baby sips so I can get a little bit of hydration, a little bit of refreshment, and not belch into all of your ears. I'm a professional. I'm 33 years old. I've been doing this for over a decade. What am I doing?
Hey, we all make mistakes, Craig. It happens.
That's true. That's true.
Some of them are unforgivable. This one, I think, is forgivable for the time being.
For the time being, until I belch in everybody's ears.
Real things.
We're not going to be so this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Set into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, there are a few players in any sport, few athletes that I dislike more than Dylan Brooks. So I did not want to give him the time of day. But if we're being honest, is there anything ever that has been said more, that is more appropriate for real things, real people said in real microphones than Dylan Brooks saying this?
You and LeBron have that exchange. There are people out there that say maybe you shouldn't do that with one of the better players in the game. What were you thinking?
I don't care. He's old. You know what I mean? I was waiting for that. I was expecting him to do that game 4, game 5. He wanted to say something when I got my 4th foul. He should have been saying that earlier on. But, you know, I poke bears. I don't respect no one until they come and give me 40. I pride myself on, you know, what I do is defense and taking on any challenge that's on the board.
You and LeBron have that exchange.
What a miserable human being.
I don't know if you're a betting man, Craig, but I'd put money down that LeBron's dropping 40 on him next game.
It does feel like that. But LeBron also has been around so long that he's not going to, like, if he gets going and it's there, yeah. But LeBron's not going to go out of it. LeBron's a 3-time champion. How many? 4 or 5-time MVP?
4-time. Yeah.
4-time champion. Cleveland, Miami, LA. Yeah, 4-time champion. Multiple-time MVP. Just, you know, competes with ghosts. Been playing 20. He's got bigger fish to fry than Dylan Brooks. And I'm not like, LeBron doesn't need me or anybody else to defend him, but like, LeBron ain't worried about Dylan Brooks. My favorite thing that I've seen from this is someone tweeted, Yeah, if I was Dylan Brooks, I'd also say it takes someone dropping 40 on me to respect him, considering guys are dropping 30 on me every night.
Also, what a fall from grace for the Memphis Grizzlies. Remember when they were one of the fun, up-and-coming teams that everyone liked to watch, and now nobody likes them?
I mean, the thing is, like, how mad can you really get at a team whose arena screams, whoop that trick at every timeout? Like, that's incredible. I still think, I think the way that everyone reacted to Ja was very humane, and he's still as much fun to watch as anybody. I really do think it's Dylan Brooks. Like, I like Tyus Jones. Like, I like a lot of guys on that team, the way they carry themselves, the way they play, the toughness they show. I really got to figure out how this light that I have that makes me look nice and pretty doesn't.
You got a nice rave over there.
Yeah, it eventually turns into a rave every day, and I can't figure out the timing of it. So that's fun. First time that happened, we were recording Take Command, which was Logan handled it great. Anyway, point is, I think that Ja and the Grizzlies are well liked outside of Dylan Brooks, who is genuine. Like, it's the dismissiveness and the disrespect that he shows. And I realize that guys like try to psych themselves out. And if Dylan Brooks was like an all NBA player who acted like that, fine. But like, you get yourself psyched out to have 28-12 dropped on you and genuinely embarrass yourself on a night-to-night basis.
I mean, if you were winning championships, this is essentially what Draymond Green is, but he's won a couple of championships, so he can kind of get away with this.
Yeah, he's the best defender, arguably, of a generation.
Exactly.
He's won 4 rings. He's actually good. Like, Dylan Brooks is fine.
Yeah, I don't. You're right though. Like, they're still fun to watch.
And also, he's a borderline dirty player too. And I think that's what. And I realize, like, comparing that to Draymond, considering current situation, a lot of people think he is too. But like, I got nothing there. We got 30 seconds left in the show.
30 seconds.
The time you told me. How long is this Chuck bit?
It's probably a little too long.
It's probably a little too long. Charles Barkley got himself in trouble. Not in real trouble, but like in embarrassment trouble in perfect Charles Barkley fashion. It's on the internet. You can go find it. Toby, great stuff. We'll see you again tomorrow. Anthony will be back on Monday. And hopefully, Toby, I'm actually done with the show today. Because yesterday, now is when the Tommy Sheppard news broke. See you tomorrow.
Daniel Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders.
Are you gonna have a